And then this is an example of tea time. And you can see most of the men are in this line. We tried to separate it, but not everyone was on board with that. So it doesn't always look like that. But usually the men were on the right, which was interesting to me. But tea time took a long time. Yeah. It was supposed to start at 10, and we usually started around 11:15, and it went into lunch. One of my favorite comments was, "We're on Kenya time," which is several hours later than the actual time. This is our food slide and facilities. So this picture right beside Lucy is what a traditional plate looked like. Every meal was very, very similar. There was not much variety, which was fine. And then this is a fish head. And I loved it. It was really good. I did not eat the actual face, but peeling the meat off, it was good. And then this is what was served with tea. Their tea is called milk tea. It's made with milk. And it was really good. I don't like tea, but that was good. And then this is a toilet. The most shocking thing to us was that we didn't have water for most of our week there. We were at Kabarak University, which is actually where Marcy went to high school. But it was hosted by Kabarak, and a few days we had about an hour of water in the morning, but aside from that, there was very limited water. No like flushing or sinks, no showers, that kind of thing. So that was the most shocking thing that we were not used to.
I'm going to chime in on the last slide. So I'm vegetarian and have been all my life. And it was a little interesting to go to a place where meat is served in chunks, like with the bone in it, and fish look like fish. So that was interesting for me. I was very proud of Jordan and Tanya for it wasn't a big deal for them. But I had coworkers when I came back, and they're like, the food looked great because I posted on Instagram. And what I couldn't quite explain, and what I hope I can convey here, is that the same food was served at lunch and dinner every day. And at first, when you're eating usually cabbage, maybe a different green, rice, and chapati, which is the bread you saw before, which is like half naan, half tortilla, that was a culture shock, at least for me at first. And by the end of it, I'm like, midway through, there's a Kenyan restaurant in Columbus. I'm like, I never need to go there. And now I'm like, you know what? I can see myself in a few months actually visiting and ordering some cabbage, some rice, some chapati, and just traveling back to Kenya. But it forced a sense of simplicity to eat the same thing every day and to almost declutter your mind around food. So, but it was very common for us to carry tissues and hand sanitizer. Never been so grateful for the kind soul who took pity on us and let us go to the hotel at 9 o'clock at night and take a shower in their room. God bless Maggie. So that was the interesting part, at least for me, and I'm going to pass this back to Jordan.
So the FUN portion, like I said, was the first 3 days. This picture down here is the Belize team. I know Nikki has visited here several times, as well as Oscar, and then that's Oscar's wife and daughter, Noah. It was really good to hear from people around the world, Belize, Ramallah, Cuba, just getting to listen and hear what missions they're doing around the world. And then this is the third highest political figure in Kenya. He was raised Quaker, and I'm not going to try to say his name because I'll mess it up, but he would, what? I don't even remember it. Marcy said to try it. Here we go. Musali Mudavadi. All right. His nickname is Mojididi. She said he likes watching DVDs, that's why he goes behind the DVD. And then this was a dance team who sort of welcomed him, and he just gave a small address.
So one of my favorite days was workshop day. When we think of a conference here in the United States, we think, we go around from workshop to workshop. There's like maybe a plenary session, we have a speaker in the evening. That's what you think conference in your head, at least for me as an American. And instead, Sunday evening through Tuesday, it's you all sit in an auditorium and listen to presentations. And that was a shift for me. So workshop day was workshops, and that was very exciting. So these are pictures from each of the workshops I went to. I started out with this one, which was the American Friends Service Committee put on, and we talked about peace building and how AFSC works and what their work is, which I actually learned a lot about them. I knew some of their work. I didn't know that they're all over the world and the scope of their work. And they recently they re-envisioned what they do, kind of created a how do we go forward plan. And part of that was we want to center people. And so instead of having someone like me work on incarceration issues, they're having formerly incarcerated individuals work on incarceration issues. They're having immigrants work on immigration issues. They're centering people who have this lived experience and empowering them to do the work. And I just think that's such a beautiful model and just amazing work. And her name is failing me at this moment. But the head of AFSC is a Palestinian American. That's a big deal, and that was a risk, as she put it, that they took. And so here she is, and then standing next to her is Dr. Miriam Wary, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Were. And she was a Nobel nominee. Nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize last year for her peace work in Kenya. And Jordan and I got to participate in some young adult activities that were centered from anyone basically the age 18 to 36, because in Quakerism, you're a young person. Sometimes, I was once on a trip with Michael Snar, and I cut him in as a young person at 60. Almost 60, so it's a flexible thing. But she came and talked to our group, and that was really neat to get to sit down with her and ask her questions, and just really interesting person. But that was a really good session. This one was Oscar and then Cliff, who was a police officer in Belize, who Oscar's partnered with to get youth out of the gang pipeline in Belize, and they've been working together for like 5 years now, and it was really neat to hear them talk. And then Getri, who works for FUM in Africa and is their projects director, she spoke about all of her peace work and told us a story about one time where after the election violence in 07 and 08 in Kenya, she was called by one of the militia people into the woods to meet with a bunch of armed men who wanted to learn about conflict resolution. And they took her phone and told her to come back for it to teach them. And Getri, I got to spend time with her in Turkana later. She's amazing. That was so cool, and I would not go into to the woods and teach conflict resolution. I'm not there yet. And then this last one was Colin Saxton was talking about revitalizing North American meetings. And I've been part of with Wilmington Friends meeting, Flourishing Friends is like a sample project. And I'm like, sure, I'll go anyway. I'll learn more about revitalizing Friends meetings. I can use that. And I think I actually came away with one of the most powerful statements from the whole trip was, does your life reflect that of God? And does your meeting reflect that of God? And I think we're really good at committee work, administrative work, at making lists, and assigning things. And to think, is the work we're actually doing, is that reflect God? And that just really stuck with me. Do you want to add anything about workshops? Okay, the missions banquet. Imagine sitting in this room for 3.5 hours and not being fed. Except this room is really, really big, and there's a lot of singing and dancing going on, and you're waiting for 3.5 hours, and you haven't been fed in a really long time, and they finally serve you cake, which Jordan, I think, ate 3 times. They made her computer come around, and they just were cutting up the cakes, which you can see here. They were beautiful. It was a very, very long evening, but it was African themed, so we dressed in our best African attire. So here I am. I got a picture with Dr. Miriam Were. Here is a sort of slightly blurry picture. You can see kind of the scope. Like, this thing was humongous. Just filled with people. Here's Tanya, me, and Jordan outside. Jordan, who are you pictured with? Jordan is pictured with someone. And we were very glad when we finally got to eat, and we were told it'd be special banquet food, and mashed bananas were the special addition to the cabbage, the rice, the chapati, and whatever various meat was. But it was a fun evening, and there was a lot of joy, and everyone was really excited, and we got to celebrate USFW, and really honor everyone and everyone's work, and it was really neat. Okay, so I'm starting Earlham's Access program in the fall as an MDiv student, and so I met a lot of Earlham students, which were really cool. So this was a picture of some current and future Earlham students on USFW Day / Quaker Men Day. They had us wear white, and I was told I looked like a missionary because I went full in for it, and it's really fun to have an excuse to like wear a headscarf. That's just something I've always wanted to do, so that was really cool. And Jordan's going to show you what it looks like in full form, and that's it folded in half. So that was just a fun day of getting to do that. And then one of the activities was everyone colored a Be the Light poster. All the Quaker women did. And so that is Tanya and Jordan coloring. And this is the Cuba presentation. One of the presentations was about Cuba, and we learned about all the challenges Cuba's facing. Carla was, I don't know where she is, but she did all the translation because our friend from Cuba did not speak English. So big kudos to her. Next.
This is a quilt made by Mary Liv Stanfield from Wilmington Friends Meeting. As I understand it, each year she would make a quilt with a theme. So this is one she made from 2001, and it has this little thing on the back. It just says, made by Mary Elizabeth Stanfield, Wilmington, Ohio. And we have had it for the last 20 years, so we gave it to the Kenyan USFW president, and she's standing here. So it is now back in Kenya's hands, and not in a filing cabinet here. So it's doing something. She was extremely excited to have it, and this woman beside me, Cynthia, she is the USFW International President.
And the really cool thing is she remembered Mary Liv and she started serving on the board for USFWI in 2001, so it was also meaningful to her.
The next two slides are not FUM or USFW related at all. Through my mom's friend, she knows someone who helps run an orphanage, a children's home in Kenya, in Nakuru where we were. So one day we boycotted USFW for a few hours and got to travel to Springs of Hope Children's Home. This is, they've got 30 kids there, ranging from 2 up to about 19. They're not in school right now, but there were about 15 kids out of boarding school as well. So they've got about 45 kids that they help out. They live on the premises. These children are orphans. So it was a great experience. This was, even though it wasn't part of FUN, this is one of my favorite parts of the trip. Seeing the children, this is when we first came in, all of the kids just bombarded our car and started giving us hugs, and they all greeted us. It was really sweet. This picture here is them playing with my hair. I had it down when I got there, and there were about 15 on me when I first walked in because they just don't feel hair like mine very often. So they played with mine and Lucy's hair for hours. They twisted it, they braided it, they did it all. And I finally got the rats out. They had so much fun. And like I said, I wish I had a picture of when we first walked in because they were all just so excited to touch a white person's hair. Here is their laundry, just airing out. This logo down here is Bagamoyo. It is Swahili for Lay on Your Heart. And they, through the orphanage, adults who have AIDS, women and men, started with just men and now women. It's a sewing project, and they make bags. They look very similar to Vera Bradley bags. They're extremely sturdy. They look really nice. But they have the sewing project. They teach women and men how to sew, so they have a skill aside from whatever else they may know.
This is Sarah. Sarah attached me the minute we got there, and I spent the rest of the day with Sarah. We did not speak the same language at all, but just, it was really special. And Jordan had her hair down, and she said, I had mine like pulled up in like a bun with my hat on, and all of a sudden like somebody was like pushing my hat off and trying to find my hair. And I was a bit confused at first, and then yeah, that was like, she has to have hair too. So it was a really great day, and I'm particularly grateful to Tanya for making this happen.
There was one girl there, she's 13, and she had a set of twins who were 2. So she had them when she was 10, and those kind of stories really strike home, and especially meeting them. But it wasn't sad being there because it's such a good environment for them. They have such a good support system with who's there. And I would love to see them adopted, but where they are is a really good option, and I think it's one of the best options for them. Unfortunately, they don't do international adoptions anymore, so I don't have any, which is probably best. Go ahead. When we first got there, there was also a group from Florida, from the women's church who runs the children's home. Oh man. She had a group from her church from Florida, so there were about 8 of us who had just gotten there for the first time. So all the kids had Bible verses and songs and karate things to show us. So this is a video of the kids doing the karate, called karate movements, I don't know, routine, I guess. One of the kids who was older, he's been there for a long time, he has competed nationally and has won some karate tournaments. So it was really neat to see him, and he has taught these kids the karate. So that was just a little routine that they did. They, like I said, I mean, they probably had 45 minutes of a program prepared for us, and they were extremely excited to do it for us.
Okay, so I was able to go on a post-conference trip, and I went to Turkana. And to kind of put in perspective, I think weather's important. So in Nairobi and Nakuru, it's winter. And everyone was very troubled by the fact we did not think it was cold, because it was like cool fall to us, slash early summer, and it was like they were wearing winter coats. So that was an interesting thing. So from Nakuru, we drove 3 hours over the equator in the mountains where there were evergreens, like pine needles. There were trees with pine needles, and it was very confusing to think you're at the equator, you're 10,000 feet above the sea, and there are pine trees in Kenya too. So our journey took us 3 hours to get to Eldoret, and from Eldoret we took a prop plane, which my mother was very concerned about what this plane would be, and I counted the seats on the first one, and there were like 37 of them, and the ashtrays were glued shut. But I'm still alive, so, and they also served an in-flight snack of a graham cracker, like cookie, so it was honestly quite impressive. So we were on an hour flight, and we get off, and it is 95 degrees, it is sunny, I'm in a desert, and it is hot. Like, this is a wet hot, imagine just a dry hot. I'm still putting together my experience in Turkana in my mind, and I know you can't see a lot of these pictures really well, but I wanted to share the feeling of them, that collectively, this is what Turkana was to me. I've never seen poverty like this. I've seen American poverty to some extent. I've seen homelessness. These are people living at the forefront of our climate emergency. Water is their entire lives. Girls can't go to school if that particular well's out because maybe they went to school, got water and went home, but now the water by their school is gone. So they've got to go in a whole different direction, and now they're not going to school. And that happens, I think, to both boys and girls, but girls are, Usually those types of burdens do fall primarily on women. Outside of Lodoir, which is the county seat of Turkana County, and map-wise, I know the map of Africa is rough for many of us as Americans. I think just below South Sudan by like an hour and a half. But a big part of our visit was visiting early childhood schools that were in Quaker churches and visiting Quaker churches. But on Sunday, we actually went to Quaker meeting at Katapakoria, which I'm pronouncing vaguely correctly, which basically translates from Turkana to English in a place where someone touched a camel, which I thought was a great name. And I have the next slide will show a video of that church, but it's a building made out of mud. And in that video, you can't see that there are wasps flying around and flies everywhere. And in a place where you don't think there could be joy, there is abundant joy. And there is gratefulness for what they have. And there is such welcome. And that is such something that's so strikingly against how we view poverty that yes, it is horrible, and that should not be taken away from that poverty is not an awful thing. But these people still have great joy, and I felt honored to get to see what Quakerism meant to them. And they sang for us, and everywhere we went, we got up and introduced ourselves. And most anything religious starts with praise God, which in Swahili is Bwana Asifiwe. I'm looking at Dan. Good? Oh, yes, okay. So I did it correctly. There were several mishaps. People laughed at me. I was funny. But also, this is like one of the few places where everybody could pronounce my last name correctly. So that was like so exciting. Cliff, that was a disastrous name. But Luciengi, everybody could pronounce Luciengi. But goats, animals just are everywhere. We saw camels. And I didn't get a picture, but on the side of the road once we saw 2 baby camels and their mamas, and that was really special. Also, I've done a lot of work with FCNO, particularly with many people in this room, and Peter, who runs the Turkana mission, who is from Turkana, has a war is not the answer FCNL bumper sticker in the middle of the desert in Africa. So of course I had to do that. We went on Monday and saw this church, and they had it made out of corrugated steel. So that was they really upgraded in church structure, and they still had a dirt floor. But we saw and visited their early childhood education class. Not every church in Turkana is a building. Some of them meet under a tree, like this one. And they've built tiny benches and a fence structure out of branches. And I tried very hard to pronounce the name and learn the name of this one. Some things I'm just not capable of. But the place, what it translated to in English was basically a place where a battle was fought, a place where people died. And to look around and to see this desert landscape with these trees that somehow survive, and know a battle was fought here, and now there is a Quaker meeting under a tree. Found that impactful. This was an example of a water pipe that needed to be fixed, and somebody was going to have to drive 30 minutes out from Lodoir to fix it. And so we were seeing that, and then that would allow water to get pumped back to, I think it was where this school was, and then people could come to school, get water, come home. If you've seen in storybooks those round circular huts, as we would call them in America, that's exactly the home structure that there was. And this picture, although you can't see it, you can see rings. People fenced in their homes, and so this was from the airplane on the way back. I could see all these circles that were people's homes, in like their yards, which is really neat. This is supposed to be a river. There's a lot of these. They haven't had rain in 3 years. So water's really dried up. This is a water pumping station that was put in. One of the main, this was children singing. We stayed at a Catholic guest house. My grandmother was Catholic, so she would have loved this. And there were nuns. And I arrived 30 minutes early to dinner one night. This is Sister Gladys. This is Alice, who does the cooking. All of a sudden, Sister Alice was having someone to take a picture with me, which that would occasionally happen, is like, oh, be in the picture. I'll show my kids basically I'm in a picture with a white person. It was a very weird kind of thing, but I talked to Sister Gladys and I talked to Alice. Alice doesn't like working at the guest house. She doesn't like cooking American food, even though it's still Kenyan-inspired food. She cooks American-style food. She used to work in South Sudan for the Kenyan army. I don't know doing what, and then her mother got cancer, and so she moved back home to take care of her mother, but that cost a lot of money, and then she lost her restaurant. So her favorite thing to cook is stir fry, though, in case anyone was wondering. But Sister Gladys picked out this pose. I did not pick out this pose, just to clarify. But we went to the Turkana 50th anniversary celebration, which they waited 3 years to have because they wanted to do it following triennial when everyone would come. And so the neat part about our group was Dan was there, Carla was there, Kelly Kellum was there. We had 2 friends from Nairobi, Emily and Patrick. We had Cliff Lash, if anyone knows Cliff, seeing some nodding of some heads. We had some other Kenyan friends who joined us, John Mombasa, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. We had a great group, and it was really neat to get to know a lot of the FUN folks more. Finally actually meet Dan in person. And it was just really great to travel with such a wonderful, Sean and Katrina were there, and it was sort of like going to this is like basically going to famous Quakers reunion, where it's just like you walk through and it's like, oh, I know that person and that person, but only from pictures. But that was kind of the cool factor. It's like, oh, all the Quaker celebrities are here. So I got to like do this trip with like all the Quaker celebrities, and it was just really nice to get to have conversations. But we all went on our second to last day and went up an hour to, thinking about the name. It's like Calico, but it's not Calico.
It is Calico. It has
Calico, thank you. All I could think of was Calico in my head. Which is about an hour north of Lodwar and sits right by Lake Turkana, which you think, oh, water, great, very large body of water where they're actually experiencing flooding. It's salt water, and the problem is a lot of like the wells and the lake, people are drinking that, and they end up with kidney stones. So, just another perspective of the water situation. But we drove an hour, and we went to the celebration, and a big part of it was sitting under tents for 9 hours. I think it was about 9 hours. It was 9 hours. Dan's nodding his head vigorously. This was the highlight because I was a special guest. I had to introduce myself once, and then I was called up a second time with everyone else who was a guest and given a tribal blanket, which was very special. And there's lots of music playing, and Carla actually took this picture, so thank you, Carla. I think I covered everything on this slide. Sorry, there was a lot. Okay. This is a video that's like 1 minute long that shows when we were in Catapacoria, their church choirs singing, and it kind of gives you an idea of Meeting House. very, very short clips. I tried to cut the other one down. Clearly, PowerPoint did not listen to my special instructions. Are of the celebration, and Turkana is a tribe, and so a lot of them got their traditional tribal outfits on, and here you go. Also, a lot of this is like, I can't like convey like, to me, if I think like I feel like smell and sound are like two really good ways to think about a place and remember a place. And what sticks out to me, that's on my recording frame, is the smell is a faintly cooking meat, and the sound is loud, joyful music, like just worship music all the time. I said it was brief. And that was the children's choir from where we attended worship on Sunday. I also feel an important note to point out is during these 9 hours, we received water, and those who wanted soda got a bottle of soda. So technically I fasted for 9 hours, which for me is impressive, because unless I'm sleeping, that's not something I'm really able to do. But I was reading, I'll just leave with two things. I was reading a back issue of the French journal my mom had given me because it was about food and Quakerism, which is right up my alley. And the letter to the editor was about, may we live simply so that others may simply live. And so as I'm thinking about themes from my time and what I observed, I felt like I was supposed to read that when I was there. And coming back, I'm very conscious of what I thought that I lived a simple life and what I thought my life was. And in comparison to America, I'm doing not that bad. But I need to consider the global consequences of my lifestyle, and feeling pretty darn guilty about driving the car these days, the half mile down to work so I can come back at lunch driving the half mile so I can have my hour of lunch break at my house. So I know a lot of this isn't really concrete reflection, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully process Turkana. I thought what Julie pointed out to me is, you know, Turkana is really special because missions are complicated. I feel uncomfortable with missions as a person myself, and the idea of evangelism and it posing, like, going and being like, here are my beliefs. That's something I am working on as a human being. And so it was really challenging to that internal narrative to go to a place where the mission director, Peter, is Turkana, and over half the board is Turkana. And these are people who we, again, are empowering, and other Quakers are empowering, to do really neat things in a place where there isn't not a lot of people are paying attention to what's happening in Turkana. And it was also interesting to be there with Kenyans from Nairobi who had the same reactions we were having, because frequently people in Turkana are asked, how's Kenya? What's going on in Kenya? Oh, this is also me, sorry. Jordan, I promise I'll hand this to you. So I ended up with one random day in Nairobi because we took the morning flight out of Ladwar straight to Nairobi. And so Cliff Lash and I spent the day together, again, for those who know Cliff. And a man named Oliver, who we were with in Turkana, said he'd host us for the day and found us a nice Quaker man to drive us around named Humphrey, who was currently unemployed, slash had worked for Oliver. That part was a little confusing, but if anybody knows IT work in the United States, Humphrey's very interested. He's working on his master's. But Humphrey works in Nairobi yearly meeting with youth, and he's really passionate about it. He's really excited about children's ministry. So he drove us around for the day, and the interesting thing about being on Nairobi on this particular Wednesday is Kenya owes a lot of money to the Chinese government, and their current president keeps heightening their value-added tax, their VAT tax, and that's really weighing down on the working poor of Kenya. And so they organized riots. So Nairobi was pretty dead for being a huge city because people weren't out, because the taxi drivers were on strike as part of this. And it was interesting. I didn't know if I was supposed to not take pictures of the police. So here's a picture of sort of, you can't see it really well here, but there are police. There were police in riot gear very frequently. We drove by the second largest slum in the world and had to turn around because there were rocks in the road, and police just casually standing off to the side ready to fire off tear gas. Doesn't sound as dire as that, but maybe in 20 minutes it was gonna get interesting. So we turned around. This is a market that would have usually been bustling that we went to. Cliff wanted a special African shirt because he's in a choir. And so we went on this adventure and got his shirt. And Humphrey showed us around some of the monuments, we'll say, of Nairobi. And the garden was closed, but we got to see where the bombing of the US Embassy was in Kenya, and learned a little bit more about that. And then, randomly enough, we were driving around someplace called Karen, and there's a museum for Karen, and Humphrey didn't really explain what this museum was. Turns out Karen is in Karen in the movie Out of Africa, which I haven't watched, but I learned was Tanya's favorite movie during the trip, and so I was very sad that she couldn't be there for ending up at this random museum that turned out to be super cool. And this woman, Karen, was from Denmark and had become a friend. She had a coffee plantation. She stayed 17 years, and if you've watched the movie, you already know how this ends. But she left, but there was a really close relationship with the local people. But and then we had to get to the airport, which took a while, an hour and a half, because we had to keep turning around because there were rioting people ahead, and so all the cars were stopped, so we'd have to turn around and find a different route. So finally we hopped on the expressway and paid our $1.10 and got to the airport. And then I flew out 6 hours later.
My mom and I were not able to stay for a post-conference excursion, so we went on a day safari in Nairobi National Park. These are some pictures. We saw everything except flamingos and elephants. It's a 78,000 acre national park, and it's not big enough for elephants. So there are no elephants in that huge park. But we got to see everything else, and we were really grateful to be able to do that before we left. We had one extra day. We got plane tickets for the next day following when we got back. So we were able to do that, which was great. And that is all. So we'll go ahead and move to questions.